Every day we are inching closer and closer to a new Dragon Age game, making it 5 years after the release of Anthem and 7 years after Mass Effect Andromeda, the two games that dug the grave that Bioware has been in. But the excitement is brewing with the release of the fourth installment to the original fantasy IP that started over 10 years ago. And where there's excitement and optimism, there's also apathy and pessimism from the longtime fans who have long been waiting for something to match Origins, going on adventures with a diverse batch of characters with rich lore and backgrounds that were captivating and engaging to talk to. Unfortunately, first impressions were not that great with the new game, as the first trailer had a staggering dislike to like ratio, and the comments were disappointed with the trailer's vibes. There were even people going back to comment on the Origins and even Dragon Age 2 trailers to express appreciation for what came before, and the lost tone of previous titles. So naturally, plenty of criticism and complaints were made, with half of it being legitimate and the other half being dumb shit. Assholes that just complained about the existence of queer characters in a series where the first installment had two openly bisexual romance options. However, legitimate concerns are being expressed, which I will be going through in this video. The main thing to address is that people's problems are not that the Veilguard is the straw that broke the camel's back per se, but rather this is a continuation of the problems that the Dragon Age series has had ever since Dragon Age 2. Going past the trailer and looking at the gameplay showcase, this was an improvement in terms of the overall tone of the game compared to the reveal trailer, as the characters were acting more serious and the world felt like it was in a more dire state. But this was when the gameplay was shown to us, revealing that it's taken a drastic turn from what the combat and gameplay we're used to. Now, from what I've seen, I would consider it an improvement from Inquisition, as the movements look flashy and engaging, and it seems more interactive and faster compared to how your party would drag their feet in Inquisition, which is my least favorite Dragon Age game. However, this expresses concern for the players who enjoyed a more tactical gameplay that was in Origins, where you would queue up spells and abilities for the characters while moving them into different positions when engaging in combat. You can also set different tactical options for your party to do automatically at different given situations. This gave the game flexibility and rewarded players who took their time to assess situations, set up choke points and ambushes, and use the character's strength to the best of their abilities. But this was something that the games would gradually move away from, as in Dragon Age 2 had the same concept but was more focused on faster paced combat animations, and then Inquisition where it felt like I was playing a shitty version of Diablo. But I guess it's my fault for playing a warrior. But it's hard to judge the moment-to-moment combat in the snippet, and we'll have to see if it stays appealing for the hours required to beat the game. However, the next concern that came in with this reveal was the party and how it worked with the player, shortening the crew size from 4 to 3. This is a very odd change, as all the games, regardless of how combat worked, always accounted for 4 members in a party, and you could control anyone in your group at any time. Not only is the party size decreased, but you also can't control your party members, instead opting for a command wheel where you select the ability of one of your companions and they perform it. This has people making comparisons to Mass Effect, as it supports a party size of 3 and has commands similar to it. But to me, this is another continuation of the issues that the series has had for years now, the ever-growing influence that Mass Effect has had on it. Now don't get me wrong, I love Mass Effect, but sometimes I wish it would stay in its own lane instead of infecting every fucking game I play. But despite everything, I can admit this is a personal preference, and I understand that the old style of gameplay is not appealing to the average gamer who wants something more engaging and can give casual fun. However, another concern with the party size going to 3 is the possibility of cutting banter shorter. The best part of not just any Dragon Age game, but any party-based RPG is the conversation and banter you can have within your party. Hearing the characters grow in your party is always entertaining, and has been a staple since Origins, but if the number is decreased to 3, that leads me to believe that the banter will be rarer, at least when it comes down to it happening while adventuring. If nothing else, I suspect that most of the character conversations will occur at the main base if this game has one, which from the newest trailer, it looks like there is. The fact remains that the gameplay has been drastically changed from what we know, which is something that has constantly been changing in Dragon Age for years now, so when it comes to the combat gameplay, we will have to wait and see how it fares for the full release to come out. Which, the same thing can be said about the companions. Veilguard is gearing up 7 companions to join with, 6 of them being completely new, and 1 of them being Harding, who made her debut in Inquisition. We also have Varric tagging along as a temporary companion, so hopefully that means nothing bad will happen to him. Not much can really be said about these companions, as we only really see snippets of them in the trailers, and the gameplay footage only shows off Harding and Neve. Even then, they stay focused on their goal, so it will come down to what we can learn about them in the full game. If pattern recognition supports me, I'll predict that one of the mages betrays you. And with the discussion of companions, this inevitably leads to the rabbit hole of romance options, and much like the gameplay, romance options are something that has changed throughout the series. In Origins, there were 2 straight options and 2 bisexual options. Characters like Alistair and Morrigan were restricted to players that chose the gender they were attracted to, while Zevran and Liliana were always available regardless of the player's choice of gender. In Dragon Age 2, everyone was bisexual and you could pair Hawke with whatever companion regardless of their gender. Inquisition was the most in-depth of the character preferences, as they could be straight, bisexual, gay, and even have a preference on the race you chose, the most notable one being Solas, who you can only romance if you were playing as a female elf. The Veilguard opts to revert to Dragon Age 2, where every romanceable character will be available to the player regardless of gender. This is very much a personal preference, but I prefer it when characters have their set sexualities. It makes the characters feel more believable, as much like in real life, people have preferences on who they want to be with. It's one of the few things I liked about Inquisition, and that they handled very well. I also like it because it encourages multiple playthroughs, and being able to experience the game through the eyes of a new character. But I understand why RPGs do the player sexual route, as to make the player not feel restricted on what they can do, and with Baldur's Gate 3 utilizing the same system, it's a safe but good choice to have everyone be available. However, something that caught my attention was the new player character Rook, and how they will work in the game. Now, I believe I speak for 90% of fans when I say that the protagonist I felt the most connected with was the hero Ferelden, specifically my Circle Mage, who was forced to leave the Circle and take on a new terrifying world full of evil, but did what he thought was best for his friends and ended up finding love and happiness in the end. Origins builds the most connection with the protagonist and the player, as we see different parts of the world with them, and the dialogue options are not spoken, therefore immersing the player even more in the position that they were in. Hawke was a drastic change from that, as they were introduced to be separate from the player and they were restricted to a human. Now, that being said, Hawke is a character I really like, but this is mainly because of her visual design, her interaction with the other characters, and her voice actress is Jo Wyatt, who voiced Ciri in The Witcher 3. But while I'm able to influence Hawke's decision, they are still meant to be their own character. And such, I feel less of a connection with them because of that reason. The Inquisitor was an attempt to bridge the gap between the hero Ferelden and Hawke. They were able to be a variety of different races rather than be restricted to a human, and they still had a voice. Unfortunately, the voice performance lacks the agency that Hawke had, and we aren't given proper time to learn about the Inquisitor's backstory like we did with the hero Ferelden. With Rook, it seems to be a similar concept to the Inquisitor. The same selection of races is available to the player, and with the addition of new backgrounds for the characters as well. The addition of these new backgrounds is welcome, and it leads to more customization and flavor to the character that we will be able to make, and I am happy to see an attempt be made to give the player character more customization. However, with what was shown in the gameplay showcase, the dialogue looks to replicate the Inquisition dialogue wheel, which had a very limited selection. I can only hope that these new backgrounds will have some meaning within the game, or at the very least provide new context to a conversation. I also hope the animations and voice acting is more compelling compared to Inquisition. We are no longer on the Frostbite engine, so at least one of those problems should be solved. And I hope that Rook is an interesting enough character to control and influence, because as each game has shifted perspectives, it has also continued the story of previous games in some way, with recurring characters and plot points, making it jarring for some people. And finally, the biggest concern I have is with the story and tone, which once again is something that the series has had an issue with for a while now. The tone of the original Dragon Age was a gritty dark fantasy vibe. To me, it was always meant to be an homage to 80s dark fantasy films, much like how Mass Effect was an homage to 80s sci-fi, and this was seen in designs of the armor, Darkspawn, and even the character of Morrigan. And this tone was continued in Dragon Age 2 as well. While I agree that Dragon Age 2 was a step down in RPG concepts, it was a step up in art direction. It was what made Dragon Age stand out among its other fantasy counterparts. The elves looked more alien, and the Qunari looked brutish and more monstrous. Putting aside the weaker story beats, the game maintained the tone of both Origins and delivered on what Bioware was known for at the time. And while I do consider Dragon Age 2 an incredibly flawed game, I can still enjoy it for what it is, unlike Dragon Age Inquisition, which was a massive step away from the art direction in my opinion, taking away what made Dragon Age stand out in favor of more generic fantasy looks. Elves reverted back to what they looked like before, and Qunari's facial structures look more human. By the way, they also revealed how the Qunari looked in the full game, so this is a thing now. While there are some exceptions, the overall design of the characters is a lot more bland, which was ironic as this was the most colorful game in the original trilogy. Now, one thing I will say about Veilguard is that the art direction is a vast improvement, especially with what was shown in the newest trailer. While not completely going back to the OG art design, it is standing out a lot more with the environment and armor. Each character is looking distinct and has something about them that makes them unique, and the look of the ancient elf tombs looks incredible, which is one of the best areas to explore in Inquisition. There is a lot shown that has great potential with the game, and I hope they deliver on the visual design with the level layouts. This game will also be level-based as well, which I consider a massive improvement from Inquisition's open world. Allowing for more focused level design can have more attention on the characters we interact with rather than a shopping list of things to do in a nothing world. But where there is improvement, there is also a nagging feeling about what they plan to do with the story and how they will handle the character of Solus. At the end of Inquisition, Solus was set up to be the main antagonist of the next game, with him killing Flemeth and taking his place as the Dreadwolf. The original title even supported this. And his motivations were laid out in the Trespasser DLC, setting him up expertly as a new threat to the world, as he wants to erase all life and bring back his ancient species of elves that he is responsible for destroying in the first place. What makes Solus special is that he is a character that we traveled with and grew to learn about, and depending on the character's choices, he became a friend, rival, or even a lover. But with the title change to The Veilguard, and what was shown in the trailer, I have a sneaking suspicion that the focus will be less on Solus himself as an antagonist, and him being one of the many threats. It looks like we stop his ritual fairly early into the game, and many monsters and dangerous entities are unleashed from the Veil wreaking havoc, reverting this game to a more generic save-the-world type story, which is not a bad thing. After all, that is what made Origins so good. But I hope that doesn't mean that the setup for Solus isn't pushed aside. I imagine the final choices in Inquisition will have some sort of effect in the game, and we can see the effects of what we did before. And hell, maybe we'll even see our Inquisitor show up at some point. But with that being said, my main hope for this game is that gameplay will be fun, characters will be engaging, and story compelling, and that this can be a well-needed break Bioware desperately needs, because at the end of the day, I don't want this game to be bad. I am a big fan of Bioware, and I want them to return to us bigger and stronger. But even if the game ends up underperforming, we still have other games to play, and other companies that can deliver.